The universe, as any respectable galactic citizen would tell you, operates on certain fundamental principles. Gravity pulls things down, energy cannot be created or destroyed, and the Krillian Empire's Vexthara warriors are absolutely, categorically, unbeatable in combat. These three facts had remained constant for roughly 14 centuries, give or take a few solar cycles, and one particularly embarrassing incident involving a fermented fruit beverage on Proxima Beta. The Krillian Empire itself sprawled across 17 star systems like a particularly aggressive case of cosmic acne, each world more militaristically obsessed than the last. At the apex of their warrior culture sat the Vexthara, elite soldiers whose very existence made other species' military forces weep into their various appendages. These weren't your garden-variety space marines who spent their weekends playing holographic poker and complaining about ration packs. No, the Vexthara underwent a training regimen so intense that it made Navy SEAL Hell Week look like a relaxing spa retreat. From the moment a Krillian child could walk upright without toppling over like a drunken tourist, they were evaluated for Vexthara potential. Those deemed worthy were whisked away to the training moon of Cosmorok, where they spent the next 200 years learning approximately 47 different ways to kill someone with a spoon, 36 methods of psychological warfare, and the subtle art of looking menacing while wearing ceremonial armor that weighed roughly as much as a small starship. The training was nothing if not thorough. Vexthara candidates learned to fight in zero gravity, underwater, in crushing atmospheric pressure, and during solar storms that could fry electronics from 3 light-years away. They mastered telekinetic combat techniques that could turn a pebble into a precision-guided munition and developed psychic abilities that allowed them to read an opponent's intentions before the opponent even knew they had any. By graduation, a fully trained Vexthara warrior could theoretically conquer a small planet armed with nothing but a moderately sharp stick and their overwhelming sense of superiority. Commander Zefkol represented the absolute pinnacle of this martial excellence. At 437 years old, he had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of warfare, and the remaining century and 37 years developing an ego to match his skills. Standing nearly 8 feet tall when fully extended, with 4 arms that moved like liquid death and compound eyes that could track 17 separate targets simultaneously, Zefkol was what other species had nightmares about. His ceremonial scars told stories of victories across the galaxy, each mark representing a world that had foolishly believed it could resist Krillian expansion, which brought the Empire to their latest target, a small blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in what the locals quaintly called the Milky Way galaxy. The inhabitants, who had somehow managed to name themselves after dirt, had only recently achieved faster-than-light communication, and were still decades away from developing proper interstellar travel. By all logical assessments, conquering Earth should have been roughly as challenging as stepping on an insect. The intelligence reports painted a picture of a species so primitive they still used chemical propulsion to escape their own gravity well. Their military technology relied on crude projectile weapons and explosive devices that wouldn't have impressed a Krillian child playing with toys. Most amusing of all, the humans appeared to spend more time fighting amongst themselves than preparing for external threats, displaying the kind of strategic thinking typically associated with particularly dim-witted space slugs. "Look at this," Zefkol had chuckled to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Vexyara, while reviewing the surveillance data. "They've divided their single planet into nearly 200 separate political entities, many of which are actively hostile to each other. Half their military resources are pointed inward instead of toward the stars. It's like they're doing our job for us." The tactical analysis was even more encouraging. Human soldiers required bulky environmental suits to operate in space, moved slowly due to their bipedal locomotion, and possessed no psychic abilities whatsoever. Their reflexes were pathetically slow by galactic standards, their physical strength laughably inadequate, and their technological level suggested they might actually pose less of a threat than the primitive Gorg tribes of Kepler 442b, who at least had the decency to throw rocks with some enthusiasm. Based on this comprehensive intelligence gathering, the Krillian High Command had made what seemed like an eminently reasonable decision: send a single strike team of 12 Vexthara warriors to secure the planet's surrender. It would be quick, clean, and provide excellent training footage for the military academies. The humans would probably surrender the moment they witnessed true Krillian combat prowess, sparing everyone the mess of actual warfare. Zefkol's team represented the cream of an already impossibly elite crop. Each warrior had been selected for specific skills that would complement the mission parameters. There was Ketnol, a specialist in urban warfare who could navigate city environments while maintaining perfect tactical awareness. Jixvara excelled at psychological operations, capable of projecting terror into enemy minds with surgical precision. The twins, Kextra and Kexmore, had perfected synchronized combat techniques that allowed them to fight as a single devastating entity. The remaining 7 warriors each brought their own deadly specializations: electronic warfare, close quarters combat, long-range assassination, biochemical analysis, structural demolition, and something the Krillian military files cryptically referred to as morale adjustment, which presumably meant they were very good at making people regret their life choices. Together, this strike team had accumulated over 2,000 years of combined combat experience. They had conquered fortress worlds, defeated armies numbering in the millions, and once famously captured an entire star system using nothing but clever positioning and an extensive knowledge of orbital mechanics. By any reasonable measure, 12 Vexithara warriors should have been sufficient to cow Earth's entire population into submission. The mission plan itself was elegantly simple. The strike team would land in one of Earth's major population centers during peak activity hours, demonstrate their overwhelming superiority through a carefully orchestrated display of force, and then broadcast demands for unconditional surrender to the planet's various governments. The whole operation was expected to conclude within 6 local hours, allowing time for proper documentation and a celebratory meal before returning home. They selected New York City as their landing zone after extensive analysis revealed it to be a major hub of human commerce, communication, and culture. Times Square, in particular, seemed ideal for maximum psychological impact. The constant flow of humans through the area would ensure widespread witness to Krillian superiority, while the abundance of electronic displays would provide multiple venues for broadcasting surrender demands. The strike team's stealth transport approached Earth's atmosphere with the kind of confidence typically reserved for apex predators stalking prey that had already given up. Advanced cloaking technology rendered them invisible to human detection systems, which, according to their intelligence, were embarrassingly primitive anyway. The ship's sensors painted a detailed picture of the target zone: millions of humans moving through carefully organized transportation networks, massive structures reaching toward the sky, and enough electronic chatter to power a small moon. Textbook urban environment, Zefkol observed as they descended through the cloud cover. Densely populated, highly organized, completely unprepared for military action. The humans have actually made this easier by concentrating so many of their number in one location. The landing itself was flawlessly executed, the transport touching down in the center of Times Square with barely a whisper of displaced air. Cloaking fields continued to hide the ship from human observation while the strike team prepared for deployment. Each warrior performed final equipment checks with the kind of methodical precision that comes from centuries of practice. Weapons were calibrated, armor systems activated, and psychic abilities focused to razor sharpness. Remember, Zefkol addressed his team through their neural communication network. We're dealing with a primitive species that has never encountered true galactic-level warfare. Overwhelming force, Minimal casualties, maximum psychological impact. By the time we're finished, the entire planet will understand exactly where they stand in the cosmic hierarchy. The cargo bay doors opened with a soft hiss, revealing Times Square in all its chaotic, neon-soaked glory. The first thing that struck the Krillian warriors was the noise. Human cities, as it turned out, were significantly louder than their intelligence reports had suggested. The constant honking of vehicular traffic, the babble of thousands of voices, the electronic cacophony of advertisements and announcements created a sensory assault that momentarily stunned beings accustomed to the ordered quiet of military installations. The second thing they noticed was the smell. Earth's atmosphere carried scents that Krillian olfactory organs had never evolved to process. Exhaust fumes, cooking food, human perspiration, and something vaguely sweet that seemed to emanate from various street vendors. It was like stepping into a chemistry experiment conducted by someone with questionable laboratory safety standards. The third observation was perhaps the most disturbing. The humans appeared to be completely ignoring them. This was not part of the plan. According to every military manual in the Krillian arsenal, the sudden appearance of heavily armed alien warriors should have triggered immediate panic, screaming, and general chaos as the local population fled in terror. Instead, the humans continued their previous activities with barely a glance in the strike team's direction. Some actually walked around them as if they were merely obstacles to be navigated rather than harbingers of planetary conquest. "Sir," Lieutenant Vexiara's voice carried a note of uncertainty through the neural link. "The humans don't seem to be reacting appropriately to our presence." Zefkol considered this development while watching a small human child point at him excitedly before being dragged away by what appeared to be a parental unit. Perhaps their primitive cognitive functions require more time to process what they're seeing. Maintain formation. The panic should begin momentarily. But the panic never came. Instead, the strike team found themselves subjected to something far more bewildering: casual human curiosity. Tourists began approaching with small electronic devices, apparently attempting to capture images. Street performers adjusted their acts to incorporate the aliens as background scenery. A man selling hot dogs actually offered them samples, gesturing enthusiastically while speaking in what their translation systems identified as heavily accented English. "Maybe they're street performers too," one human was heard saying to another. "The costumes are incredible. How do they make the eyes glow like that?" "Has to be some kind of promotional stunt," came the reply. "Probably advertising a new movie. The special effects are getting really good these days." This interpretation of events had apparently spread through the crowd, because instead of fleeing in terror, more humans began gathering to watch. Some even began applauding when Catanol inadvertently activated his plasma rifle's targeting system, causing a series of holographic displays to appear around his weapon. Commander Zefkol found himself in the unprecedented position of being completely ignored by the species he had come to conquer. Centuries of military training had prepared him for resistance, for desperate last stands, for cunning ambushes and guerrilla warfare. None of his extensive education had covered what to do when the enemy mistake you for entertainment. "New plan," he announced through the neural link, his voice carrying just a hint of strain. "We spread out and conduct reconnaissance, gather intelligence on human defensive positions, command structures, and military capabilities. Reconvene in one local hour with full tactical assessments." The strike team dispersed into the crowd with professional efficiency, each warrior assigned to investigate different aspects of human civilization. What they discovered over the next hour challenged every assumption their species had made about Earth and its inhabitants. Ket Nall, the urban warfare specialist, spent 47 minutes trying to identify military installations and defensive positions. What he found instead was a city designed around the apparently radical concept that its inhabitants might want to actually live in it. Parks provided green spaces for recreation. Restaurants offered sustenance that wasn't exclusively focused on caloric efficiency. and entertainment venues seemed to exist for no purpose other than making humans happy. The transportation systems particularly baffled him, rather than the strictly controlled movement patterns typical of military societies. Humans appeared to move through their city in completely chaotic but somehow functional ways. They formed spontaneous queues, navigated complex intersections through some form of collective intuition, and managed to transport millions of individuals daily using systems that should have collapsed under their own inefficiency. Jixvara, meanwhile, attempted to analyze human command structures by observing their social hierarchies. This proved even more confusing than the transportation systems. Humans seemed to have multiple, overlapping authority structures that changed depending on context. The same individual who deferred to authority in one situation might exercise command in another. Even more puzzling, they appeared to routinely question, debate, and sometimes completely ignore instructions from their supposed superiors. The twins, Kextra and Kexmore, found themselves inadvertently recruited as assistants by a street magician who assumed they were part of his act. Their perfectly synchronized movements, which had terrified enemies across the galaxy, apparently made for excellent entertainment when combined with card tricks and rabbit-producing hats. The experience was so surreal that they temporarily forgot their mission parameters and spent 20 minutes helping a human perform illusions for an increasingly delighted crowd. But it was Zephkol himself who encountered the most significant challenge to Krillian military doctrine. While attempting to project an aura of intimidating authority, he failed to notice a discarded banana peel that some careless human had dropped near a hot dog cart. The peel, yellowed with age and slick with the kind of urban patina that develops on abandoned organic matter in major cities, lay directly in his path, like some cosmic practical joke waiting for the perfect moment to spring. The commander of the Vexthara, veteran of 1,000 battlefields, master of 47 combat disciplines, and possessor of reflexes quick enough to dodge plasma bolts at point-blank range, stepped squarely onto the banana peel at precisely 2:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What happened next would be analyzed by xenobiologists, military historians, and comedy theorists for generations to come. Zephkol's right foot, encased in ceremonial combat armor weighing approximately 47 pounds, encountered a surface with roughly the same coefficient of friction as a sheet of ice coated in cooking oil. The laws of physics, which had served the universe faithfully for billions of years, saw no reason to make an exception for Krillian dignity. The commander's forearms windmilled frantically as he attempted to maintain balance, creating a display that several humans later described as resembling a really angry octopus having a seizure. His compound eyes, evolved to track multiple fast-moving targets simultaneously, could only watch in horrified slow motion as the ground approached his face with inevitable certainty. The impact was tremendous. Zephkol struck the pavement with enough force to crack his helmet's display system and activate 3 separate emergency medical protocols. His ceremonial cape, designed to flow dramatically behind him during moments of triumph, instead wrapped around his head like an oversized blindfold. The various technological devices attached to his armor began emitting warning sounds that, combined with his pained groans, created what one witness described as sounding like a robot garbage disposal eating a synthesizer. The effect on his strike team was immediate and catastrophic. Lieutenant Vexiara, who had been maintaining overwatch from a position near a pretzel stand, rushed to assist his commander without looking where he was stepping. The same banana peel that had claimed Zephkol caught Vexiara's foot, sending him tumbling into a display of novelty t-shirts that advertised things like, "My parents visited New York, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt," and "I heart NY" in letters large enough to be read from orbit. Ketnal, alerted to his commander's distress through the neural link, sprinted across Times Square with the fluid grace that marked him as a master of urban combat. Unfortunately, his attention was focused entirely on reaching Zephkol. Not on the hot dog vendor who chose that exact moment to wheel his cart into the street. The collision between a 200-pound Krillian warrior and a mobile food preparation unit created a spectacular fountain of condiments, processed meat products, and what humans apparently called sauerkraut. The twins, Kextra and Kexmore, attempted to maintain some semblance of tactical formation while responding to the crisis. Their synchronized movements, so effective in combat situations, proved less useful when trying to navigate a crowd of humans who were now actively trying to help the fallen aliens. Well-meaning tourists offered assistance, street vendors provided napkins for cleanup, and someone even called emergency medical services because those cosplayers look like they might be hurt. Within minutes, the elite strike force that had come to conquer Earth found themselves the center of a humanitarian crisis. Humans surrounded them offering assistance, medical attention, and expressions of concern that would have been touching if they weren't so thoroughly humiliating. Someone produced a first aid kit. Another individual began directing traffic around the scene. A third person started collecting the scattered contents of Zeph Cole's equipment harness, apparently unaware that they were handling weapons capable of reducing city blocks to radioactive craters. "Are you guys okay?" asked a young human female who couldn't have been more than 20 local years old. She was helping Zeph Cole untangle himself from his cape while simultaneously live-streaming the entire incident to something called social media. "That was like the most epic fail I've ever seen. But don't worry, everyone slips on banana peels sometimes. It's like a classic comedy thing." The phrase epic fail repeated in Zeph Cole's mind as he struggled to regain his footing. Centuries of military training had not prepared him for this level of casual dismissal. He was a Vexthara commander, a being whose very presence should have inspired awe and terror across the galaxy. Instead, he had become what humans apparently called a viral video in the making. "Sir," Vexiara's voice carried through the neural link with barely contained panic, "the humans have begun documenting our tactical setback. Multiple recording devices are active, and the footage appears to be spreading through their communication networks." Indeed, within minutes of the Great Banana Incident, videos of the alien warriors' spectacular pratfall had been uploaded to every major social media platform on Earth. Hashtags like #AlienFail, #BananaPeelWarriors, and #Invaders versus Gravity began trending globally. Comments poured in from around the world, ranging from expressions of concern for the performer's well-being to detailed analyses of the physics involved in such an impressive wipeout. The footage quality was remarkably good, considering it had been captured on consumer electronics. Multiple angles showed every detail of the collapse, from Zeph Cole's initial confident stride to the final tangle of limbs and equipment that left the strike team looking like a pile of very expensive and technologically advanced laundry. Someone had already created a slow-motion remix set to classical music, but the real damage was yet to come. The same interstellar communication networks that had allowed the Krillian Empire to coordinate across 17 star systems also carried Earth's internet traffic to the broader galactic community. Within hours, the video had been viewed by species across the known universe. The Altarian Confederation found it amusingly representative of Krillian arrogance. The Zeta Reticulan Collective filed it under Cautionary Tales Regarding Surface Conditions on Primitive Worlds. The Andromedan Republic declared it the funniest thing since the Great Plutonium Shortage of 2387. Commander Zeph Cole, meanwhile, found himself facing a crisis that no amount of military training had prepared him to handle. How does one maintain the dignity of an elite warrior caste while covered in mustard and surrounded by helpful humans offering wet wipes? How does one project an aura of cosmic authority while sitting on a sidewalk, trying to figure out why their armor's environmental systems keep beeping warnings about condiment contamination? The answer, as it turned out, was that one does not. Instead, one accepts the assistance of primitive humans who somehow manage to show more grace and compassion in 5 minutes than most galactic civilizations display in a century. "Here, let me help you up," offered the same young woman who had been live streaming the incident. She extended a hand to Zeph Cole with the kind of genuine concern typically reserved for family members. "You took a pretty hard hit there. Are you sure you don't need a paramedic?" The commander of the Vex Thara, conqueror of worlds, terror of the galaxy, looked up at this small human offering assistance to someone she believed was simply a street performer who had suffered an accident. The complete absence of fear, suspicion, or hostility in her expression was perhaps the most alien thing he had encountered since arriving on Earth. "I am functional," he managed to say, his translation software struggling with concepts like gratitude and embarrassment. "Your assistance is appreciated." "No problem," she replied cheerfully. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Besides, that costume is way too cool to leave lying in the street. How much did all this cost? It looks like professional movie stuff." As his strike team slowly regrouped around him, Zeph Cole began to understand that their intelligence reports had missed something fundamental about human civilization. These beings weren't primitive because they lacked advanced technology. They weren't weak because their military was divided. They weren't easy targets because they spent time on art and entertainment and making their cities pleasant to live in. They were something that the Krillian Empire, for all its military might and technological superiority, had never learned to be: kind to strangers. The realization hit him with more force than the pavement had. Here he was, a heavily armed alien warrior who had come to conquer their planet, and their first instinct was to offer help. They saw someone in distress and responded with compassion rather than suspicion. They created art and music and comedy, not because they were frivolous, but because they understood that life should be about more than mere survival. "Sir," Lieutenant Vexiara interrupted his philosophical revelation, "we should consider returning to the ship. The mission parameters may need revision." Zeph Cole looked around at the crowd of humans who had gathered not to gawk at their misfortune, but to offer assistance. Someone had brought them bottled water. Another person was helping clean condiments off their equipment. A third individual was explaining to a police officer that the performers seemed to be okay and probably didn't need medical attention unless they wanted it. "Yes," he said quietly. "I believe they do." The strike team's withdrawal from Times Square was considerably more subdued than their arrival. Instead of projecting overwhelming military superiority, they found themselves waving goodbye to the humans who had helped them, accepting business cards from talent agents who thought their act would be perfect for various entertainment venues, and trying to figure out how to explain to the Krillian High Command that their invasion had been derailed by a piece of discarded fruit. The journey back to their ship was conducted in stunned silence, each warrior lost in thoughts that military training had never prepared them to process. They had come to Earth expecting to encounter primitive savages ripe for conquest. Instead, they had discovered a species that responded to adversity with humor, to strangers with kindness, and to their own spectacular failure with offers of assistance. Back aboard their transport, safely cloaked and preparing for departure, Zeph Cole faced the unenviable task of composing his mission report. How does one explain to a military hierarchy built on concepts of strength and dominance that they had been defeated not by superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but by basic human decency and a discarded banana peel? His preliminary report was a masterpiece of military understatement. Initial contact with human population revealed unexpected tactical considerations requiring further analysis before implementing conquest protocols. Recommend extended observation period to fully assess defensive capabilities. What he didn't include was his growing suspicion that Earth's primary defense wasn't military at all. It was something far more dangerous to the Krillian way of thinking. The possibility that there might be better ways to live than as professional conquerors. That strength might come from cooperation rather than domination. that a species' greatness might be measured not by how many worlds they had conquered, but by how they treated visitors who slipped on banana peels in their public squares. The video, meanwhile, continued its journey through galactic communication networks, carrying with it a message that no military strategist could have planned. Other species began to take a closer look at Earth, not as a potential conquest, but as an example of what intelligent life might become when it chose compassion over conquest. The Krillian Empire, faced with the galaxy's most humiliating military footage since the infamous Battle of the Wrong Solar System incident 3 centuries earlier, quietly shelved their invasion plans pending further review. Official statements spoke of reassessing strategic priorities and developing new tactical approaches, but everyone understood the truth. They had been defeated by fruit-based urban hazards and human kindness. And in Times Square, where it all began, life continued with its usual chaotic energy. Street vendors sold hot dogs and pretzels to tourists. Performers entertained crowds with magic tricks and music. Electronic billboards advertised everything from Broadway shows to soft drinks. And somewhere, probably, another banana peel waited patiently for its moment of cosmic significance. The universe, as any respectable philosopher would tell you, has a sense of humor. It's not always kind, rarely fair, and frequently involves banana peels at the most inopportune moments. But sometimes, just sometimes, it uses that humor to teach important lessons about the difference between strength and cruelty, between power and wisdom, and between conquering worlds and actually being worth conquering them for. The Krillian Empire learned that lesson the hard way, broadcast across the galaxy in high-definition video with surprisingly good audio quality. And Earth, blissfully unaware of how close it had come to invasion, continued spinning through space, protected by nothing more than the basic human instinct to help someone who had taken a really impressive fall. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through the simple act of extending a hand to help someone up off the pavement. Even if that someone happens to be a heavily armed alien warrior who came to conquer your planet and ended up learning about gravity instead. The banana peel, having served its cosmic purpose, was eventually swept up by city maintenance crews and deposited in an organic waste facility, completely unaware that it had just prevented an interstellar war and fundamentally altered the balance of galactic power. Such is the way of the universe. Profound, ridiculous, and absolutely determined to remind everyone that no matter how advanced, powerful, or dangerous you think you are, physics doesn't care about your resume.